Fox Hollow was once an unremarkable speck on the map, a quiet farming town tucked between rolling hills and sprawling forests. But for Sarah McKenna, it was more than just a refuge. It was a new beginning, a chance to leave behind the life she thought she had buried. A decorated Green Beret sniper with a career cloaked in classified operations, Sarah traded the sharp edge of war for the steady rhythm of the soil. Her days were filled with repairing fences, planting crops, and raising her two children, Lily and Danny. But peace is fragile, and the past has a way of catching up. When a notorious outlaw gang known as the Shadow Raiders rolled into town, they underestimated the quiet farmer at the edge of the valley. They thought they'd found another easy target, a struggling single mother they could intimidate into submission. What they didn't realize was that Sarah had spent 2 decades hunting men like them, and she wasn't about to let her home fall without a fight. What started as a local skirmish spiraled into something far greater. As Sarah rallied her community to defend against the Shadow Raiders, she uncovered a chilling truth. The gang was just a pawn in a much larger game. Behind them stood Blackbridge Industries, a shadowy corporation orchestrating chaos to profit from the aftermath. Blackbridge didn't just want to control Fox Hollow. They wanted to rewrite the very fabric of resistance. Using cutting-edge technology, bioweapons, and their far-reaching influence, they sought to crush any community that dared to stand against them. As the battle for Fox Hollow intensified, Sarah was thrust back into the life she thought she'd left behind. A world of deception, high-stakes tactics, and impossible decisions. With her family, her friends, and her town caught in the crossfire, she would have to dig deep into her past and forge unlikely alliances to confront an enemy far more powerful than she ever imagined. But Blackbridge wasn't just after Fox Hollow. Their ambitions stretched across borders, aiming to establish a global system of control under the guise of order. Sarah's fight was no longer about protecting a single town. It was about exposing a conspiracy that threatened the very concept of freedom. In the shadows of Dominion, where power and justice collide, one woman's courage ignites a resistance that could change everything. How far will Sarah go to protect her home? And what will it cost her to uncover the truth? The story begins with a single act of defiance, but where it ends will shape the destiny of countless lives. Welcome to Shadows of Dominion, a tale of resilience, sacrifice, and the unyielding power of community in the face of overwhelming odds. Fox Hollow, nestled in the rolling hills of Montana, thrived as a symbol of self-reliance and resilience. A place where neighbors knew one another and lent a helping hand without being asked, the town had become a quiet haven after Sarah McKenna's leadership had transformed it into a bastion of independence. The community had not only survived an attack from the notorious Shadow Raiders, but had dismantled a corporate effort to dominate their way of life. Now, a new storm loomed on the horizon, and this time, the stakes were higher than ever. Sarah, a retired Green Beret sniper, was no stranger to vigilance. Standing on her porch, she scanned the landscape with eyes that missed nothing. The early morning light bathed the town in gold, but a nagging unease lingered. She clutched a mug of coffee in one hand while the other remained free, instinctively ready for action. Her Australian shepherd, Scout, sat alert at her feet, his ears perked toward the woods beyond the farm. A subtle vibration from her phone broke the stillness. Sarah glanced at the screen. It was Shadow, the reformed operative who had become one of her most trusted allies. "We've got chatter," his gravelly voice came through. Encrypted comms from a Black Ops channel. "It's about us." Her grip tightened on the phone. "How bad?" "Bad enough. It's coordinated, international. They're not just targeting Fox Hollow. They're watching similar movements across the world. Looks like we've become the example they're afraid of." Sarah felt a cold wave ripple through her. The successes of Fox Hollow had inspired other communities to adopt self-reliant defense programs. While this was a point of pride, it had also drawn the attention of those who thrived on control, corporations, intelligence agencies, and governments. Shadow continued, "There's a name floating around, Colonel Marcus Vane. You know him?" The name was like a sharp sting. "I know him," Sarah said grimly. "We crossed paths in Kandahar. He was ruthless, but smart. He doesn't leave loose ends. He's leading this op. They're calling it Operation Eclipse. Sarah's stomach knotted. She glanced back at the house where her children, Lily and Danny, were finishing breakfast. This wasn't just about her or the town. It was about protecting everything they had built and everyone they loved. An hour later, Sarah met Shadow, Tom, and Martha at the town's community center. Tom, a veteran mechanic with a prosthetic leg and a sharp tactical mind, leaned over a table cluttered with maps and intercepted transmissions. Martha, the town's matriarch and a seemingly mild-mannered former secretary, sat with a laptop, her calm demeanor masking a lifetime of experience and intelligence. "They're moving fast," Shadow said, spreading out satellite images. "We've identified drone activity near the north perimeter. Small, stealth units, recon drones, maybe weaponized. Surveillance first," Tom muttered. "They're testing our response." Martha chimed in, her fingers flying over the keyboard. "I've been tracking financial movements. Blackbridge Industries is funneling money into shell companies linked to this operation. They're not just here to intimidate, they're funding a full-scale destabilization campaign." Sarah's jaw tightened. "We're not going to let them turn us into another one of their experiments." By nightfall, the first sign of intrusion came, a faint, high-pitched whine of a drone. It was almost imperceptible, but Scout's bark confirmed it. Sarah grabbed her rifle and stepped onto the porch, her sharp eyes scanning the darkened horizon. "North Ridge," she said into her comms. "Shadow, Tom, you're on point?" The drone appeared as a faint glint in the moonlight, hovering like a predator stalking prey. Sarah exhaled slowly, steadying her aim. One precise shot later, the drone plummeted into the woods. "They're probing," Shadow's voice came through. "This was a decoy. The real team won't be far behind." In the hours that followed, Sarah activated Protocol Omega. Hidden systems throughout Fox Hollow came to life. Not weapons, but something far more dangerous to their enemies. Truth. Encrypted files began uploading to servers worldwide, programmed to release sensitive data if the town's command network went dark. These files, meticulously curated by Martha, contained decades of classified information about illegal government programs, covert operations, and financial corruption. "This is our insurance," Martha explained as she monitored the uploads. "If they try to erase us, we erase their secrets." The first physical breach occurred just before dawn. A black ops team, equipped with cloaking technology, infiltrated the town's outer perimeter. They moved with military precision, their black uniforms blending seamlessly with the shadows. But Fox Hollow had prepared for this. Tripwire sensors triggered blinding flashes of light and dense plumes of smoke, disrupting the operatives' night vision. Sarah coordinated the town's response from the command center, her voice calm and authoritative over the comms. "Team Alpha, hold your positions. Beta, flank from the east." The community, now well-trained and disciplined, executed her orders flawlessly. Reformed raiders, once enemies, now worked alongside farmers and shopkeepers, turning the familiar terrain into a tactical advantage. As the attack intensified, Sarah confronted Vane over the comms. His voice, cold and calculated, filled the room. "Impressive setup, McKenna. But you're interfering with power structures you can't begin to understand." Sarah's response was sharp. "I understand perfectly. You're here because we're proving that people don't need to submit to control. That terrifies you." Vane chuckled. "You think you're fighting for freedom. All you're doing is prolonging the inevitable." The battle raged for hours, but the Black Ops team underestimated Fox Hollow's resolve. By dawn, they had retreated, leaving behind disabled drones and scattered gear. The town stood victorious, but Sarah knew this was only the beginning. In the aftermath, Shadow approached her, his expression grim. "They'll be back," he said, "and they won't stop until they've silenced us completely." Sarah looked out over the town, the first rays of sunlight breaking through the clouds. "Let them come," she said quietly. "We've shown them that resistance is possible. Now it's time to show the world." The sun rose over Fox Hollow, casting a golden light on a town that had just weathered its first coordinated attack from the shadows of global power. The air was heavy with tension, though the streets remained calm. Beneath the surface, A storm brewed as Sarah McKenna and her allies worked tirelessly to uncover the next move in the invisible war. Sarah stood at the community center's command table, the maps and intercepted communications from the previous night spread before her. The Black Ops team's retreat wasn't a victory. It was a delay, a regrouping for an even larger assault. She knew it, and so did Shadow, who leaned over the table beside her, his expression unreadable. "This wasn't their full force," Shadow muttered, tracing his finger along the map's edges. "They were testing us. The next wave won't be this subtle." "Subtle?" Tom snorted as he entered the room, his prosthetic leg tapping rhythmically against the floor. "They came in with cloaking tech and drones. What's next? Orbital strikes. They'll hit harder," Sarah said, her voice firm. "But they'll also look for weaknesses. And I need to know, Shadow, are you one of them?" The room fell silent. Shadow's jaw tightened as he straightened, meeting Sarah's gaze with a mixture of defiance and resignation. "I'm not working for Blackbridge," he said, "but I'm not exactly clean either." Tom stepped forward, his stance aggressive. "What does that mean?" Shadow hesitated, then exhaled sharply. "I've been feeding them limited intel, just enough to keep them from sending their full might here. It was the only way to buy us time." The room erupted in a cacophony of voices. Tom's anger was palpable, while Martha calmly took notes, her sharp mind already calculating the implications. Sarah raised a hand, silencing the chaos. "Why didn't you tell me?" Sarah asked, her tone icy. "Because I knew you'd never agree," Shadow replied. "But it worked. Last night's attack was a fraction of what they could have brought." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "You don't get to make that call without me. If we can't trust you, we can't fight together." Shadow didn't flinch. "Then let me prove it. I can still feed them misinformation, throw them off our trail, but you need me on the inside." Meanwhile, Danny and Lily had their own mission. Sarah's children had grown into integral parts of Fox Hollow's resistance. While Danny's sharp observational skills made him invaluable for surveillance, Lily's knack for strategy and leadership shone as she organized the town's youth into a coordinated network of lookouts and messengers. Danny had been monitoring Scout's unusual behavior. The dog had taken to barking at one particular stretch of fence near the eastern fields, seemingly without cause. Intrigued, Danny grabbed a pair of binoculars and climbed to the roof of the barn for a better view. At first, he saw nothing unusual, just the tall grass swaying in the morning breeze. But as he adjusted the focus, a faint glint caught his eye. A figure moved in the distance, concealed by the trees. Danny's heart raced as he realized the figure wasn't wearing Black Ops gear. It was someone from the town. He climbed down and ran to find Lily. Together, they reviewed the surveillance footage from the eastern sector. The grainy images confirmed Danny's suspicion. A resident was sneaking out at night, heading toward the perimeter. Why would someone from town be out there? Danny asked. Lily frowned. There's only one reason, to help the enemy. Back at the community center, Martha had been digging through encrypted files intercepted during the attack. Her findings were chilling. This goes deeper than we thought, Martha said, addressing the group. Blackbridge isn't just targeting us. They're funding similar operations in small towns worldwide. It's a global destabilization campaign, and Fox Hollow is ground zero. Sarah studied the files, her mind racing. The documents revealed a network of operatives, shell corporations, and bank accounts funneling resources into what appeared to be a coordinated effort to control independent communities. Tom slammed his fist on the table. They're trying to turn us into a test case. If we fall, they'll replicate it everywhere. We're not going to fall, Sarah said firmly. That evening, Danny and Lily followed the suspected mole under the cover of darkness. They trailed the figure to an abandoned barn near the town's outskirts. Inside, they found a cache of equipment, communication devices, maps, and even surveillance footage from within the community center. Danny whispered, "They've been spying on us." Lily nodded grimly. "We need to tell Mom." Before they could leave, the barn door creaked open. Dr. Kate stood in the doorway, her expression a mixture of shock and guilt. "Kids," she said softly, "you shouldn't be here." The confrontation that followed was tense. Kate admitted her role as a plant, but insisted she had never passed along critical information. "I was sent here to report on Sarah," Kate said, but I've seen what this community can do. I won't let Blackbridge destroy it. Then help us, Lily said. Kate hesitated, then nodded. I have intel on their next move. But if they find out I've switched sides, we're all in danger. The next day, Sarah convened a meeting with her inner circle. Danny and Lily revealed the mole's cache, while Kate shared details about Blackbridge's escalating plans. They're deploying bioweapons, Kate said. DNA-targeting bacteria, designed to look like a natural outbreak. They'll use it to wipe out resistance and claim plausible deniability. The room fell silent as the gravity of the situation sank in. We need a countermeasure, Sarah said. Kate, can you help us neutralize the bacteria? Kate nodded. I'll need access to the lab beneath the town. It might have what we need. Sarah turned to Shadow. You wanted to prove your loyalty. Here's your chance. Get us intel on their deployment plans. Shadow met her gaze and nodded. You can count on me. The chapter ends with the town united but on edge, preparing for an even greater challenge. Trust hangs by a thread. Secrets threaten to unravel their unity, and the clock ticks toward an impending attack. Sarah knows the battle ahead will test not just their defenses, but their very humanity. The morning haze hung over Fox Hollow like a fragile veil, the kind that couldn't mask the mounting tension beneath its surface. Sarah McKenna stood at the edge of the abandoned Cold War lab Lily had discovered the night before. The structure, hidden beneath a forgotten grain silo, had long been sealed off, its purpose buried in the annals of history. But now, it was a lifeline, a desperate hope in the face of Blackbridge's escalating tactics. Dr. Kate Rogers crouched beside her, examining the corroded steel door that served as the lab's entrance. If the equipment in here is even remotely functional, we might have a chance to counter their bioweapons. Sarah nodded. Then we'll make it functional. Kate glanced up, a flicker of doubt in her eyes. You realize what's at stake if this goes wrong. The bacteria they're deploying isn't just a weapon. It's engineered to erase entire populations under the guise of a natural disaster. Sarah's jaw tightened. That's why we don't have the luxury of going wrong. The team descended into the lab, a cavernous maze of reinforced corridors and obsolete equipment. Dim emergency lights flickered overhead, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Martha, ever the pragmatic leader, carried a tablet loaded with schematics she'd unearthed from declassified files. This place was part of a network, Martha explained as they moved deeper. Back in the 60s, the government built facilities like this as contingency plans. It was meant to store experimental tech and biological samples. Tom ran his hand along a rusting console. Yeah, well, looks like the contingency didn't include maintenance. Kate brushed past him, her focus unwavering. Some of this might still be salvageable. We just need access to the containment unit. Meanwhile, Shadow had slipped out of the town under the cover of darkness. His mission was simple: gather intel on Blackbridge's next move. His journey took him to a nearby airstrip where the corporation's drones were being housed. Posing as a technician, Shadow gained access to their command hub. The scene was unnervingly sterile. Rows of engineers seated at glowing monitors, their faces illuminated by data streams. Shadow's trained eye caught the unmistakable signature of Blackbridge's latest weapon: autonomous drones programmed to deploy the DNA-targeting bacteria. This isn't just an attack, Shadow muttered to himself. It's a scorched earth campaign. He managed to slip a small device into their mainframe, a tracker that would allow Fox Hollow to monitor Blackbridge's movements. But as he left the facility, he couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching him. Back in the lab, Sarah's team worked tirelessly to bring the old systems online. Danny, ever the curious observer, had tagged along, his youthful energy a stark contrast to the weight of the mission. Mom, look at this, Danny called, pointing to a rusted terminal. Sarah joined him, her eyes narrowing at the faded label on the screen: Project Genesis, Biocontainment Protocols. This might be it, Kate said, her voice tinged with excitement. She powered up the terminal, and the room filled with a low hum as ancient machinery sputtered to life. Martha leaned over the console. This system predates modern encryption. If we can access the containment logs, we might find something useful. As they worked, a sudden burst of static crackled through their comms. Shadow's voice came through, urgent and breathless. They're deploying in 72 hours. Drones carrying the bacteria are set to launch from the airstrip. Sarah's stomach churned. Did you get coordinates? Sending them now, Shadow replied. But there's more. They're not just targeting Fox Hollow. They're hitting 3 other towns simultaneously. This is a coordinated strike. The weight of his words sank into the group like a lead anchor. While the lab team focused on deconstructing the bacteria's programming, Lily led her youth network in fortifying the town. She had grown into a fierce leader, her calm under pressure earning the respect of even the most skeptical adults. East Sector needs more coverage, Lily instructed over her walkie-talkie. Get spotters on the ridge and set up decoys along the tree line. One of her scouts, a wiry teen named Caleb, approached her with a report. We found another cache near the creek. It's got surveillance gear, high-end stuff. Lily frowned. They're watching us closer than we thought. Stay vigilant. As dusk settled, the lab team made a breakthrough. Kate managed to isolate the DNA markers the bacteria was programmed to target. With this knowledge, they could potentially create a neutralizing agent. There's one problem, Kate said, her face pale under the flickering lights. The neutralizer requires mass deployment. We'd need an airborne delivery system to counteract their drones. Tom smirked. Good thing we've got a crop-dusting plane in the barn. Sarah nodded. Then that's our plan A. But what's plan B? Danny asked. Sarah met his gaze with steely determination. We don't let it get that far. The next morning, Shadow returned to the town, visibly shaken. He had barely escaped a black ops patrol on his way back, and his near-miss had rattled him more than he cared to admit. I got the tracker working, Shadow reported. We'll know when they're on the move. But they're escalating faster than we anticipated. What about Vane? Sarah asked. Shadow hesitated. He's not just overseeing this operation. He's the architect. Every piece of this plan has his fingerprints on it. The chapter builds to its climax as Sarah outlines their next steps. Teams are divided. Martha will oversee the lab's efforts to finalize the neutralizer. Tom and Shadow will prepare the plane for deployment. Lily and Danny will manage town defenses, ensuring no blind spots remain. As they disperse, Sarah pulls Shadow aside. You've proven yourself, she said. But if you betray us again, there won't be a third chance. Shadow nodded solemnly. I won't. The chapter ends on a tense note as Sarah stands on the edge of town, looking out at the darkening horizon. Scout growls softly at her feet, his ears perked toward the woods. Whatever they're planning, Sarah murmured, we're ready for them. Above her, the faint hum of a drone cuts through the silence, a chilling reminder that time is running out. The morning light over Fox Hollow felt cold despite the sun's warmth. Sarah McKenna stood in the barn, watching Tom inspect the crop-dusting plane they planned to use to deploy the neutralizing agent. His hands moved with practiced precision, but his silence spoke volumes. Everyone knew the stakes were higher than they'd ever been. Lily appeared in the doorway, her face pale but determined. Mom, you need to see this. Now. Sarah followed her daughter to the community center, where Martha was pacing beside a glowing monitor. On the screen was a live feed of a private jet landing at a nearby airstrip. The tail markings, though subtle, identified it as belonging to Blackbridge Industries. James Whitehall, Martha said, her voice laced with tension. He's here. The name hit Sarah like a punch to the gut. Whitehall wasn't just the CEO of Blackbridge. He was her half-brother, a shared secret she had buried long ago. The idea of facing him now, with everything at stake, felt like reopening an old wound she'd spent years trying to forget. Later that afternoon, Sarah stood on the town's edge, waiting. The low rumble of an approaching convoy announced Whitehall's arrival. SUVs pulled up, their tinted windows reflecting the surrounding fields. The door of the lead vehicle opened, and James Whitehall stepped out, dressed in a tailored suit that contrasted sharply with the rugged landscape. Sarah, he said smoothly, spreading his arms in a mock embrace. It's been too long. Not long enough, Sarah replied, her voice icy. Whitehall chuckled. I always admired your sharp tongue. Still keeping these folks entertained with your doomsday theatrics. What do you want, James? He adjusted his tie, his expression shifting to one of calculated charm. What I've always wanted, to help. You've built something remarkable here, Sarah. A model of community resilience. I'm offering you the resources to scale it globally. Imagine this, Fox Hollow as the blueprint for secure, independent living. Sarah folded her arms, her gaze unflinching. And what's the price? James smirked. Control, of course. A partnership. You handle the optics, I handle the logistics. Together, we can revolutionize how communities protect themselves. Inside the community center, Shadow listened to the exchange over a secure comlink. His jaw clenched as he recognized the subtle manipulation in Whitehall's tone. He's not just here for Sarah, Shadow muttered. He's here for leverage. If he gets control of this place, he controls the movement. Tom, seated beside him, tightened his grip on a wrench. He doesn't know us if he thinks we'll roll over for a suit and a smile. Back at the meeting, Whitehall shifted tactics. His tone grew softer, more personal. You've always been stubborn, Sarah. But think about your kids. Danny and Lily deserve a future that isn't shadowed by war. With Blackbridge's backing, we can guarantee their safety. The mention of her children struck a nerve, but Sarah refused to show it. What's your real angle, James? Why come here now? Whitehall sighed theatrically. If you must know, the board is growing impatient. They see Fox Hollow as a problem, an anomaly in the system. I see potential. I'm offering you a chance to secure this town's survival. The alternative, he trailed off, his meaning clear. That night, the tension in Fox Hollow reached a boiling point. The town council gathered to discuss Whitehall's proposal. Arguments erupted as people weighed the promise of resources against the cost of independence. He's offering us a way out, one resident shouted. Why not take it? And give up everything we've fought for? Lily shot back. That's not who we are. Tom stood, his voice calm but firm. We've seen what Blackbridge does to the places it touches. They don't build communities. They strip them for parts. We're better than that. While the debate raged, Danny had been reviewing surveillance footage from the airstrip where Whitehall had landed. His sharp eyes caught something unusual, a hidden compartment in one of the SUVs. He enhanced the image and gasped. Mom, he called, running into the meeting room. They've got weapons, biological canisters, just like Kate described. Sarah's stomach dropped. Whitehall wasn't here to negotiate. He was here to deliver the means to destroy Fox Hollow if they refused his terms. The discovery set the town into action. Sarah ordered teams to secure the perimeter and double their defenses. Meanwhile, Shadow took it upon himself to infiltrate Whitehall's convoy under the guise of seeking information. At the airstrip, Shadow managed to plant a tracker on one of the SUVs. He listened in as Whitehall spoke with Colonel Marcus Vane over a secure channel. She's not going to budge, Whitehall admitted. But we have the leverage. If they don't comply by tomorrow, deploy the bacteria. Vane's voice was as cold as ever. Understood. Ensure you're clear of the area before detonation. The following morning, Whitehall summoned Sarah to a final meeting. The tension between them crackled like static as they faced each other near the edge of the fields. This is your last chance, Whitehall said, his tone devoid of charm. Sign the agreement, or Fox Hollow becomes the cautionary tale instead of the example. Sarah stepped closer, her voice low and steady. You've forgotten something, James. You're not dealing with a boardroom. You're dealing with people who know what it means to fight for what's right. Whitehall's mask of composure cracked. You always were impossible. Fine. Have it your way. But don't say I didn't warn you. As Whitehall's convoy left town, the atmosphere grew thick with anticipation. Shadow returned to the community center with grim news. They're not bluffing, he said. The canisters are ready, and Vane's preparing for deployment. They're waiting for the signal. Sarah nodded. Then we don't give them the chance. The darkened skies over Fox Hollow carried a foreboding sense of urgency. As the clock ticked toward the next strike, Sarah McKenna found herself back in the abandoned Cold War lab, standing in front of a rusted console that now hummed with resurrected life. The data streaming across the terminal screen confirmed her worst fears. The bacteria designed by Blackbridge wasn't a weapon they'd created. It was a relic of the lab's own experiments from decades ago. Dr. Kate Rogers worked frantically beside her, isolating the genetic markers of the bacteria. Her hands trembled as she typed. This strain isn't just advanced. It's engineered for rapid mutation. Once deployed, it could spiral out of control faster than anything we've seen before. Sarah absorbed the information, her jaw tightening. How did this end up in Blackbridge's hands? Kate paused. There's only one explanation. Someone in this town, or someone tied to its past, leaked it. At the community center, Shadow relayed updates from the tracker he'd placed on Whitehall's convoy. The vehicles had stopped at a secluded airstrip where the canisters of bacteria were being loaded onto drones. They're accelerating their timeline, Shadow reported. The drones will launch in less than 12 hours. Tom slammed a fist on the table. We've got to take out that airstrip. Martha interjected, her tone measured. If we attack without neutralizing the bacteria first, we risk dispersing it ourselves. We don't have a choice, Tom argued. We can't sit here and wait to be exterminated. Sarah entered the room, her face set in determination. We're not sitting. Kate's working on a counteragent. Tom, get the crop dusting plane ready. We'll deploy it over the airstrip before they can launch the drones. As the town mobilized, Lily and Danny continued their surveillance efforts. They had grown into a formidable team, their bond strengthening with every challenge. While monitoring the east perimeter, Danny noticed something strange, an unfamiliar signal transmitting from one of the older homes on the outskirts of town. Lily, he said, pointing at the blinking on his tablet. That house isn't supposed to have any comms equipment. The siblings decided to investigate. Armed with nothing more than their instincts and a flashlight, they approached the house under the cover of darkness. Inside, they found a hidden communication station, an elaborate setup that could only belong to someone working with Blackbridge. Back in the lab, Kate finally cracked the bacteria's mutation sequence. This should work, she said, holding up a vial of the synthesized neutralizer. But it's untested. If we deploy it wrong, we could make things worse. Sarah took the vial, her expression resolute. We don't have the luxury of perfection. We're going to make it work. As dawn approached, the plan went into motion. Tom piloted the crop-dusting plane, its engine sputtering but determined as it carried the neutralizer toward the airstrip. Sarah and Shadow led a ground team to provide backup, knowing the mission would draw Blackbridge's forces. The airstrip was eerily quiet when they arrived. Drones sat on launch pads, their sleek designs gleaming under floodlights. Whitehall's convoy was gone, but a small contingent of armed guards remained. Sarah signaled her team to move. Stay low. We don't engage unless we're spotted. From the plane, Tom's voice crackled over the comms. I'm coming in for the first pass. Get ready. As the plane released the neutralizer, the guards below scrambled in confusion. Sarah and her team took advantage of the chaos, disabling the drone's control systems one by one. Shadow worked with surgical precision, planting charges on the remaining drones. We can't leave any of these intact, he muttered. Just make sure you're clear before detonation, Sarah replied. Meanwhile, Lily and Danny followed the trail from the hidden comm station back to the lab. Their discovery led them to an old storage room filled with records and sealed documents. One name appeared repeatedly, Dr. Elias Whitehall. Wait, Danny whispered. Isn't that James Whitehall's father? Lily finished, her voice heavy with realization. He was part of the original project here. That's how Blackbridge knew about the bacteria. The siblings grabbed as many files as they could carry and rushed to find their mother. Back at the airstrip, the mission was nearing its climax. Tom's plane made its final pass, releasing the last of the neutralizer. The guards, disoriented and coughing from the chemical cloud, retreated into the surrounding forest. But just as Sarah signaled for extraction, a familiar voice crackled over her comm. Did you really think it would be this easy? Colonel Marcus Vane's voice was cold and mocking. Sarah turned to see Vane emerge from the shadows, flanked by a small team of operatives. He held a remote detonator in his hand. I have a failsafe, Vane said, his eyes locked on Sarah. You destroy the drones, and this detonator disperses the bacteria manually. Your call, McKenna. The scene grew tense as Sarah calculated her options. She motioned for her team to hold their positions. Let's talk, Vane, she said, stepping forward. There's nothing to talk about, Vane replied. You're an anomaly, McKenna, a relic of a system that no longer works. You and your town represent chaos. I bring order. And who decides what order looks like? Sarah shot back. In a flash of movement, Shadow lunged at Vane, knocking the detonator from his hand. The operatives opened fire, and chaos erupted. Sarah and her team returned fire, neutralizing the threat with practiced efficiency. In the end, Shadow stood over Vane, breathing heavily. "You're done," he growled. Vane smirked, blood trickling from his lip. "Am I?" The tremors beneath the airstrip sent shockwaves through the earth, but it was the sight of the dark, swirling bacterial cloud rising into the sky that made Sarah McKenna's blood run cold. As the cloud grew, she and her team scrambled for cover, knowing they were racing against time and nature itself. In the abandoned Cold War lab, Dr. Kate Rogers frantically worked at her console, her hands flying over the keyboard. The monitors displayed alarming data. The bacteria, now exposed to the atmosphere, was mutating at a speed she hadn't anticipated. "This isn't just spreading, it's adapting," Kate muttered, her voice shaking. Martha, standing beside her, adjusted her glasses and analyzed the data. "It's targeting organic matter indiscriminately. If it keeps mutating, the neutralizer won't hold for long." Kate nodded grimly. "We need a secondary agent to counteract this evolution. Something faster, more aggressive." "How long do we have?" Martha asked. Kate glanced at the readouts, her face pale. "Minutes, maybe hours." At the airstrip, Shadow and Tom pulled Sarah behind a damaged drone as they ducked for cover. The remaining Blackbridge operatives were retreating, their focus now solely on survival. "We need to stop that cloud," Sarah said, scanning the chaos. "The neutralizer's deployed, but it's not enough," Shadow replied, his voice grim. "We've got to find a way to contain it." Tom pointed toward the control tower, where a weather control system used for testing flight conditions still blinked faintly. "That might be our best shot. If we can trigger an artificial downpour, we might be able to ground the bacteria." Back in the lab, Lily and Danny arrived with the files they discovered at the old comm station. Slamming the folders onto Kate's desk, Lily blurted, "You need to see this. It's about the bacteria's origin." Kate flipped through the documents, her eyes widening. Dr. Elias Whitehall. He was the lead scientist on the Genesis project. Martha leaned over the files, her face darkening. "And he knew the bacteria's potential all along. Look at these notes. There was never a plan to decommission it. He left this lab's work unfinished, knowing it could be weaponized later." Lily frowned. "So Blackbridge didn't just stumble on this. They've been planning this for decades." Kate suddenly froze, her eyes scanning a particular line in the report. "Wait, there's something here. An experimental agent developed alongside the bacteria. A failsafe." "What kind of failsafe?" Danny asked. Kate looked up, her expression both hopeful and terrified. "Something that could accelerate the bacteria's breakdown. But it's risky. If we don't control the dosage perfectly, it could destabilize the entire area." At the airstrip, Sarah led her team toward the control tower, fighting through the thickening haze of bacteria. Tom worked to bypass the tower's security system, while Sarah held off the encroaching cloud with her rifle trained on the perimeter. "How's it coming, Tom?" she called over the comms. "Almost there," Tom replied, sweat beading on his forehead. "Just need another minute." "You've got 30 seconds, Sarah snapped. Shadow, standing guard, spotted movement in the distance. A group of Blackbridge operatives was regrouping, their weapons trained on the tower. "We've got company," he warned. Back in the lab, Kate and Martha worked on synthesizing the failsafe agent. The equipment sputtered and groaned under the strain, relics of another era being pushed to their limits. "This isn't going to hold," Kate said, her voice tense. Martha placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "It has to. We've got no other choice." Lily and Danny assisted where they could, organizing supplies and monitoring external data. Danny's sharp eyes caught a disturbing trend on the lab's main screen. "Mom's team is right in the middle of the worst area," he said. Kate nodded, her focus unyielding. "If we don't get this agent to them soon, it won't matter what we do here." At the tower, Tom finally broke through the system's security, activating the weather control system. A low rumble filled the air as artificial rain began to fall, creating a barrier between the rising bacterial cloud and the surrounding area. It's working, Shadow called out. But before they could celebrate, Vane's voice crackled through their comms. You think a little rain will stop us? Sarah's eyes darted to the horizon, where a Blackbridge chopper approached, carrying reinforcements and additional canisters of bacteria. Of course he has a backup plan, she muttered. As the chopper neared, Shadow grabbed a shoulder-mounted rocket launcher from one of the disabled drones. I've got this, he said, taking aim. Make it count, Sarah replied. With a deafening roar, the rocket streaked toward the chopper, striking its tail rotor. The aircraft spiraled out of control, crashing into the nearby woods. That's one problem down, Tom said, exhaling in relief. But we're not done yet, Sarah replied, her eyes on the still mutating bacterial cloud. In the lab, Kate and Martha finally completed the synthesis of the fail-safe agent. The vial glowed faintly, a small but potent solution to the crisis. Now we just need to get this to Sarah, Kate said. Lily stepped forward. I'll take it. Martha hesitated. It's too dangerous. I know the perimeter better than anyone, Lily argued. I can get there faster than anyone else. Kate reluctantly handed her the vial. Be careful. If this breaks before it's deployed, it could make things worse. Lily nodded, determination etched into her features. As Sarah and her team held their ground at the tower, Lily appeared, racing through the smoke and rain. She handed the vial to her mother, her breath labored. We only have one shot at this, Lily said. Sarah examined the vial, her mind calculating the best way to deploy it. She turned to Tom. Can the weather system handle this? It'll have to, Tom replied. The team loaded the fail-safe agent into the weather system, praying it would disperse evenly across the affected area. As the rain intensified, the bacterial cloud began to dissipate, the neutralizer working in tandem with the fail-safe. It's working, Shadow said, watching the cloud shrink. But just as hope began to rise, Vane emerged from the shadows, a gun trained on Sarah. You think you've won? He sneered. This is just the beginning. The rain-soaked ground of Fox Hollow was eerily quiet, save for the hum of the weather control system dispersing its final burst of the fail-safe agent. Sarah McKenna stood over Colonel Marcus Vane, her rifle trained on him as he knelt in the mud. Blood trickled from a gash on his temple, but his twisted smirk remained. You stopped the first wave, Vane said, his voice cold and steady. But you don't understand what you're dealing with. This bacteria was never meant to be controlled, not even by us. Then why deploy it? Sarah demanded, her tone edged with fury. Vane chuckled darkly. Control through chaos. It's the oldest trick in the book. Make people desperate enough, and they'll beg for the solution you've already prepared. Sarah tightened her grip on the rifle. And what's your solution? Turn every town into a Blackbridge outpost? Vane shrugged. Something like that. But it's too late now. You might have stopped the drones, but the bacteria's already adapting. Your precious failsafe isn't enough. In the lab, Kate's face was pale as she stared at the glowing remnants of the bacterial cloud on her monitor. The neutralizer and failsafe had worked for a moment, but now the bacteria was displaying unprecedented behavior. It's rewriting itself, Kate muttered, her fingers flying over the keyboard. Martha leaned in, studying the data. This isn't random. It's targeting new genetic markers, broad-spectrum ones. If this continues, it could become airborne and infect anyone. Kate nodded grimly. We need to create a new counteragent, something that can anticipate its mutations. But we don't have time, Martha said. Kate turned to Danny and Lily, who had just returned from the airstrip. We might have one last chance. The files you found on Elias Whitehall, there has to be something in there about a backup plan. Lily immediately began sorting through the documents. Here, there's a mention of a Genesis override. What is that? Kate's eyes widened. It's a suppression protocol, a genetic command embedded in the bacteria to force it into dormancy. If we can activate it, Danny finished her thought. We could stop it from spreading. Back at the airstrip, Sarah's comm crackled to life. Kate's voice was urgent. Sarah, we found a suppression protocol in the original files. If we can synthesize it, we might be able to shut the bacteria down completely. What do you need? Sarah asked, her gaze flicking between Vane and the fading remnants of the bacterial cloud. The override requires a specific genetic sample, Kate replied. It has to come from someone directly connected to the original project. Someone with Elias Whitehall's DNA. Sarah's stomach sank. James Whitehall. Yes, Kate confirmed. He's the key. The team regrouped in Fox Hollow, where tensions were at an all-time high. With the bacteria mutating faster than anticipated, time was running out. Sarah gathered her core team in the community center to devise a plan. We know where James Whitehall is, Martha said, pointing to a map. He's at a secured Blackbridge facility 30 miles from here. Tom folded his arms. That's a fortress. Getting in won't be easy. We don't have a choice, Sarah said. If we don't get that DNA sample, everything we've fought for will be lost. The mission was set for nightfall. Sarah, Shadow, and Tom would infiltrate the Blackbridge facility while Lily and Danny coordinated defenses in Fox Hollow. Kate and Martha would remain in the lab, working on synthesizing the override. As the infiltration team prepared to leave, Lily pulled Sarah aside. "Be careful, Mom," she said, her voice steady but filled with concern. "We can't do this without you." Sarah hugged her daughter tightly. "You're stronger than you think, Lily. If anything happens to me, you'll lead this town." The Blackbridge facility was a monolith of steel and glass, surrounded by high-tech defenses and patrolled by armed guards. Using Shadow's insider knowledge and Tom's tactical expertise, the team slipped past the perimeter. Inside, the facility was a maze of sterile corridors and surveillance systems. Shadow led the way, his movements precise and deliberate. "He'll be in the executive wing," Shadow whispered. "Follow me." As they approached Whitehall's office, the sound of voices stopped them in their tracks. Peering around a corner, Sarah saw James Whitehall speaking with a team of scientists. "This bacteria is our greatest asset," Whitehall said. "If Fox Hollow falls, the rest will follow." "But it's mutating beyond control," one of the scientists protested. "Then let it burn itself out," Whitehall snapped. "We'll rebuild on the ashes." Sarah stepped into the room, her rifle raised. "You're not rebuilding anything." Whitehall froze, his face a mask of shock and rage. "Sarah, always so dramatic. Hand over a sample of your DNA," Sarah demanded. "Now." Whitehall smirked. "And why would I do that?" "Because if you don't," Sarah said, stepping closer, "this bacteria will mutate beyond even your ability to control it. It'll spread, and you won't be able to spin your way out of the blame." Whitehall hesitated, the weight of her words sinking in. Finally, he nodded to one of the scientists, who retrieved a sterile vial. The extraction was anything but smooth. As the team made their way back through the facility, alarms blared, and Blackbridge security swarmed the halls. Shadow and Tom provided cover fire as Sarah secured the DNA sample in a protective case. "We've got to move," Tom shouted, taking out a guard with a well-placed shot. The team barely escaped, sprinting through the forest as reinforcements pursued them. Shadow led them to a hidden exit point, where an old Blackbridge vehicle awaited. "Get in," Shadow yelled. Back in Fox Hollow, Kate worked furiously to integrate the DNA sample into the suppression protocol. The lab buzzed with urgency as data streamed across the monitors. "Come on," Kate muttered, her hands shaking as she calibrated the final sequence. Outside, Lily coordinated with the town's defenders as reports of increased bacterial activity poured in. "It's spreading faster," one scout reported. "We're running out of time." Lily's jaw tightened. "Hold the line. We just need a little more time." The hum of approaching drones reverberated through the valley, a chilling prelude to the chaos about to descend. Sarah McKenna stood on the roof of the community center, binoculars pressed to her eyes as she counted the incoming fleet. At least a dozen sleek Blackbridge drones zipped toward Fox Hollow, their metallic surfaces glinting in the moonlight. "They're loaded with something," Shadow said, his tone grim. "Probably more bacteria canisters." Sarah lowered the binoculars and turned to him. "Then we stop them before they reach the town." Below them, Lily was rallying the town's defenders. The youth network she had trained worked quickly, relaying orders and preparing defensive positions. Meanwhile, Tom and a handful of veterans armed themselves for the inevitable ground assault. "We're running out of time." Kate's voice crackled over the comms from the lab. The bacteria is adapting faster than I anticipated. If those drones release anything, even the override might not be enough. Sarah's mind raced as she calculated their options. Shadow, Tom, get ready to intercept those drones. Lily, coordinate with the perimeter teams. We'll buy Kate the time she needs. What about you? Shadow asked. Sarah tightened the strap on her rifle. I'm taking the override to the field. We're deploying it directly at the source. In the lab, Kate worked furiously to load the override agent into a delivery system. The glowing vial sat in a pressurized chamber, its contents calibrated to the exact genetic markers needed to shut the bacteria down. This is cutting it too close, Kate muttered as Martha monitored the bacterial activity on her screens. Martha shook her head. We've been cutting it too close for days. We're still standing. Kate managed a weak smile. Let's hope that streak holds. As Sarah loaded the override into her pack, Lily ran up to her, determination blazing in her eyes. I'm coming with you, Lily said. No, Sarah replied firmly. I need you here, holding the line. Lily grabbed her mother's arm. You need me. I've been watching you lead my whole life, and now it's my turn to have your back. For a moment, Sarah hesitated. Then she nodded, her expression softening. Stay close, and listen to every word I say. Shadow and Tom set up near the edge of town, using a makeshift launcher to intercept the first wave of drones. The devices fired a net of electromagnetic pulses, disrupting the drone systems and causing them to spiral out of control. That's 2 down, Tom said, reloading the launcher. Only 10 more to go, Shadow muttered, scanning the sky. A warning crackled over the comms. Incoming hostiles on the ground. Through the trees, Blackbridge operatives emerged, their movements precise and deadly. The veterans opened fire, their training and familiarity with the terrain giving them an edge. We can't hold them forever, Tom said between shots. We just need long enough for Sarah to do her job, Shadow replied. Sarah and Lily moved quickly through the forest, heading toward the point where the bacterial cloud was densest. As they approached, the air grew heavy, the faint glow of the bacteria illuminating the trees in an unnatural light. Lily pulled her scarf over her mouth. It's worse than I thought. Sarah checked the override device. We get in, deploy this, and get out. No stopping, no second-guessing. But their path was soon blocked by a new threat. A Blackbridge drone hovered just above the ground, scanning the area. Stay low, Sarah whispered. The drone's sensors swept toward them, but before it could sound an alarm, Sarah fired a single shot. The bullet struck its power core, sending it crashing to the ground. Nice shot, Lily said. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. Comes with the territory. At the edge of town, the battle intensified. The Blackbridge operatives pressed forward, using advanced tactics and equipment to overwhelm the defenders. Tom and Shadow fought side by side, their combined experience proving invaluable. I think I know why they're hitting us so hard, Shadow said, reloading his weapon. Why's that? Tom asked. They're not just trying to destroy the town. They're trying to stop Sarah from deploying the override. Tom grimaced. Then we'd better make sure they don't. In the lab, Kate monitored the bacteria's behavior as the override device in Sarah's pack drew closer to the cloud. The screens showed promising signs. The genetic markers in the override were beginning to react with the bacteria. It's working, Kate said, her voice filled with cautious hope. Don't celebrate yet, Martha warned. If Sarah doesn't reach the center of that cloud, it won't spread far enough. Sarah and Lily finally reached the heart of the bacterial cloud. The air was thick, and every breath felt like a struggle. Sarah pulled the override device from her pack and set it on the ground. Stay back, she instructed Lily as she activated the deployment sequence. The device began to hum, releasing a fine mist into the air. The bacteria reacted immediately, its glow dimming as the override agent spread. But before they could leave, a familiar voice echoed through the clearing. Well done, McKenna, Colonel Vane said, stepping out from the shadows. He held a detonator in one hand and a gun in the other. But did you really think I'd let you win this easily? Sarah raised her rifle, her eyes locked on Vane. You've already lost. The override is active. Not quite, Vane replied, his smirk widening. This detonator will release a concentrated burst of bacteria across the entire area. Your override might slow it down, but it won't stop it. The standoff was tense, the fate of Fox Hollow hanging in the balance. Lily, standing behind Sarah, noticed something Vane hadn't. The override mist was creeping closer to him. "Mom," Lily whispered. "Keep him talking." Sarah stepped forward. "You don't have to do this, Vane. You're not saving anyone by destroying us." Vane's grip on the detonator tightened. "You're naive, McKenna. Sacrifices must be made for the greater good." "Sacrifices like the people in this town?" Sarah asked. "They're a means to an end," Vane replied. As he spoke, the override mist reached his feet. Vane began to cough, his bravado faltering as the agent took effect. Sarah seized the moment, lunging forward and knocking the detonator from his hand. Lily rushed in, kicking the device away as Vane collapsed to the ground, weakened by the override. With the override fully deployed, the bacterial cloud began to dissipate, its glow fading into the night. Sarah and Lily returned to the lab, where Kate and Martha confirmed the override's success. "It's breaking down," Kate said, relief washing over her. "But we're not done yet," Sarah replied. "Blackbridge won't stop until they're held accountable." The adrenaline of the battle had barely subsided when the chilling message from James Whitehall echoed across Fox Hollow's comms. His voice, calm and calculating, carried a thinly veiled threat. "You've proven resourceful, Sarah, but do you really think a single victory changes the game? Blackbridge operates on a scale you can't imagine." Sarah stood in the lab, gripping the edge of the console as Whitehall's words sunk in. Around her, Kate, Martha, Lily, and Shadow listened intently. The bacterial cloud had been neutralized, but the fight was far from over. Martha, ever the realist, spoke first. "He's stalling. Whatever Blackbridge is planning next, it's already in motion." Kate frowned at her screen. "I just intercepted partial data from their network. It's incomplete, but it looks like they're shifting resources towards something called Project Dominion." Shadow's face darkened. "That's not a name you throw around lightly. Dominion implies control, on a massive scale." As the town regrouped, Sarah called an emergency meeting in the community center. The room buzzed with tension as the townspeople, veterans, and reformed raiders gathered. "We won the battle, but Blackbridge isn't done with us," Sarah began, her voice steady. "They're regrouping, and we need to be ready for whatever comes next." Tom stepped forward. "What's the plan, Sarah? We can't keep fighting them forever." "We don't have to," Sarah replied. "Not if we dismantle their operation from the inside." "Shadow, what do we know about Project Dominion?" Shadow hesitated. "Not much yet, but I do know this. It's global. Blackbridge isn't just targeting Fox Hollow. They're leveraging what happened here to justify expanding their operations worldwide." Meanwhile, Lily and Danny worked with Kate and Martha to decipher the intercepted data. Their efforts uncovered fragments of a chilling plan. Blackbridge intended to use advanced surveillance and genetic profiling to identify and neutralize any communities that posed a threat to their control. "They're creating a global network," Lily said, scrolling through lines of code. "Surveillance, drones, bioweapons, it's all connected." Danny pointed to a highlighted section. "And it looks like they've already started testing it in other towns." Martha nodded grimly. "We need hard proof. Something irrefutable that shows what they're doing and how far they're willing to go." Shadow proposed an audacious plan. "There's a Blackbridge command center 2 states over. It's their regional hub, where all their data flows through. If we can infiltrate it, we'll get the evidence we need to expose Dominion." Tom folded his arms. "That's a suicide mission. You're talking about walking into their stronghold." "That's why we need a distraction," Sarah said, her mind already working. "If they're focused on defending something else, their guard at the command center will be lower." The distraction came in the form of a coordinated effort by Fox Hollow's allies. Communities that had adopted Sarah's defense model staged demonstrations, drawing attention to Blackbridge's activities. Media coverage and public scrutiny forced the corporation to deploy resources to contain the growing unrest. As protests spread, Sarah, Shadow, and a small infiltration team prepared for their mission. Lily approached Sarah before she left. "I can help. I know the tech, and I know how they think. Sarah placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder. I need you here, Lily. If this mission fails, the town will need a leader. Lily hesitated, but eventually nodded. Be safe, Mom. The infiltration team traveled under the cover of darkness, using back roads and shadows insider knowledge to avoid detection. The Blackbridge Command Center was a fortress of steel and glass, surrounded by high-tech security and patrolled by armed guards. Shadow briefed the team as they approached. Their servers are housed in a secure vault on the lower level. If we can plant a data siphon, we'll extract everything we need. Tom surveyed the perimeter through binoculars. Looks like they've diverted some of their forces. Still, this won't be easy. It never is, Sarah replied. The team moved with practiced precision, slipping past patrols and hacking into access points. Inside the command center, the sterile corridors and blinking consoles exuded an unsettling aura of control. As they reached the server room, Shadow worked quickly to bypass the security protocols. The data siphon was activated, and streams of information began flowing to Martha's secure terminal back in Fox Hollow. We've got it, Shadow said, but it's going to take time to download everything. We don't have time, Tom replied, glancing at his watch. The tension thickened as an alarm blared. Sarah's voice cut through the chaos. Shadow, stay on the siphon. Tom, cover the door. We hold this position until the download is complete. Back in Fox Hollow, Lily and Danny monitored the data in real time. Martha's face grew pale as the files revealed the true scope of Project Dominion. They're not just targeting communities, Martha said. They're targeting people, activists, leaders, anyone who might resist. Lily's jaw clenched. They're building a database of dissidents. This isn't security, it's a preemptive strike. Kate looked at the screen in horror. And they're using the bacteria as leverage. Any town that resists becomes a test site. At the command center, the infiltration team was cornered. Blackbridge operatives flooded the halls, their precision tactics forcing Sarah and her team into a desperate firefight. We're out of time, Shadow shouted, yanking the siphon from the server. We've got enough data. Let's go. The team fought their way out, narrowly escaping through an emergency exit. As they disappeared into the night, the sound of reinforcements echoed behind them. When Sarah and her team returned to Fox Hollow, the atmosphere was electric. The data they'd extracted contained everything they needed, evidence of Blackbridge's crimes, the full extent of Project Dominion, and the names of key players involved. We've got them, Martha said, her eyes scanning the files. Now what? Tom asked. Now, Sarah replied, we take this public, but we have to do it fast. If Blackbridge realizes what we've got, they'll come at us with everything they have. The dawn over Fox Hollow brought no peace, only the ominous calm before the storm. Sarah McKenna stood in the community center's command room, the weight of their next move pressing down on her shoulders. The data they had extracted from Blackbridge's servers was explosive, proof of crimes that could topple governments and dismantle global power structures. But James Whitehall's threat echoed in her mind. Blackbridge wasn't going to let this go. Martha tapped at her keyboard, broadcasting the files to secure locations worldwide. The first wave is being uploaded. Journalists, activists, and trusted whistleblowers are already receiving the data. Kate added, the medical evidence is being sent to labs that can confirm its authenticity. Once it's public, Blackbridge won't be able to deny any of this. Lily approached, her face pale but determined. Do you think they'll retaliate before it goes live? Sarah nodded grimly. They always do. The first signs of retaliation came before noon. Blackbridge's private network unleashed waves of cyberattacks, targeting not just Fox Hollow but the allies who had stood with them. Communications flickered, bank accounts froze, and power grids wavered. Danny and Lily worked tirelessly to keep the town connected. We've rerouted our systems through secure backups, Danny said, his hands flying over the keyboard. But they're relentless. Kate monitored the data flow. We just need to hold out until the upload completes. Once the files are out, it's over for them. As the cyberattacks escalated, so did the physical threat. Blackbridge drones appeared on the horizon, accompanied by an armored convoy heading straight for Fox Hollow. Shadow and Tom assembled the town's defenders, a mix of veterans, reformed raiders, and civilians who had trained for this moment. Remember, Tom said, addressing the group. This isn't just about protecting our town. It's about standing up for every community they've tried to control. Sarah joined them, her rifle slung over her shoulder. They're coming to silence us. But we've faced everything they've thrown at us before. We're still standing, and we'll keep standing. The first strike came from the drones. Equipped with advanced targeting systems, they fired non-lethal but incapacitating rounds designed to disorient and disable. Sarah and Shadow worked together to counter them, using electromagnetic disruptors to bring the drones down. On the ground, the armored convoy breached the town's perimeter. Blackbridge operatives poured out, their movements precise and deadly. But Fox Hollow's defenders were ready, using the town's layout and their intimate knowledge of the terrain to outmaneuver the invaders. Lily coordinated the defense from the command room, issuing orders and relaying updates. Team 3 blocked their advance on the east side. Team 5 reinforced the barricades near the school. Tom's voice crackled over the comms. They're pushing hard on the north side. We need backup. Inside the lab, Kate monitored the upload status. We're at 75%, she reported. Almost there. Martha glanced at the surveillance feed, her face tightening. We've got movement near the lab. They're trying to cut us off. Danny sprang into action. I'll take care of it. Before anyone could stop him, he grabbed a radio and headed for the lab's perimeter. On the battlefield, Sarah faced James Whitehall himself. He emerged from one of the armored vehicles, flanked by elite Blackbridge operatives. You're persistent, McKenna, Whitehall said, his voice carrying over the chaos. I'll give you that. But persistence doesn't win wars. Power does. Sarah raised her rifle. Power without purpose is nothing. Your empire is crumbling, Whitehall. It's over. Whitehall smiled coldly. Not yet. He pressed a button on a handheld device, triggering an explosion that rocked the town. A secondary bacterial cloud began to rise, smaller but more concentrated than the first. In the lab, alarms blared as Kate and Martha analyzed the new threat. This isn't like the first one, Kate said, her voice trembling. It's engineered to bypass the override. Lily's voice came over the comms. What can we do? Kate took a deep breath. We need to modify the override in real time. It's risky, but it's our only chance. Danny reached the lab perimeter, where Blackbridge operatives were attempting to breach the doors. Using a makeshift distraction, he led them into a trap set by the town's defenders. As the invaders retreated, Danny returned to the lab, bruised but triumphant. They won't get through. How's the override coming? Kate smiled faintly. It's a work in progress, but we'll make it. Back on the battlefield, Sarah and Whitehall exchanged fire, their personal duel mirroring the larger battle. You're fighting a losing war, McKenna, Whitehall sneered. Even if you win here, the system will rebuild itself. Then we'll tear it down again, Sarah retorted, firing a shot that grazed his arm. Shadow and Tom joined the fray, helping Sarah push Whitehall's forces back. In the lab, the modified override was finally complete. Kate handed the delivery system to Danny. Get this to your mom. She's the only one who can deploy it. Danny nodded, racing through the chaos with the override clutched tightly. The final confrontation unfolded at the heart of the town, where Whitehall's forces made their last stand. Sarah spotted Danny running toward her, the override in hand. We've got it, Danny shouted. As he reached her, Whitehall lunged, knocking the override from Danny's grasp. It tumbled to the ground, rolling perilously close to the bacterial cloud. No, Sarah shouted, diving for the device. She grabbed it just as the cloud began to shift, the bacteria sensing new targets. With no time to lose, Sarah activated the override and hurled it into the center of the cloud. The device detonated, releasing a pulse of energy that neutralized the bacteria in seconds. The cloud dissolved, and the battlefield fell silent. In the aftermath, Whitehall was captured, his elite operatives surrendering as the weight of their defeat set in. The files from Blackbridge's servers were fully uploaded, sparking global outrage and investigations into the corporation's activities. Fox Hollow had one. As the town began to rebuild, Sarah addressed the community. We didn't just fight for ourselves, she said. We fought for every town, every family, every community that deserves to live without fear. This isn't just our victory. It's a message to anyone who thinks they can control us. We are stronger together.